Good evening. Wow, what a full house we have tonight. It's great to see so many people here, and I'm particularly excited to be here in the Lower Town Hall. We've been having this event for a couple of years now, and we just haven't been able to find a venue big enough. So tonight we had to come to town, and now we've filled a quite large venue tonight, so I'm thrilled. But before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to elders both past and present. I'm Helen Lochhead, and I'm Dean of the Faculty of the Built Environment at UNSW Sydney, and I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight for our third Engaging Women in the Built Environment at the fabulous Lower Town Hall. I'd like to welcome our friends and colleagues from industry, government, and of course, professional bodies, and I can see many of my UNSW peers, alumni, and students. But a special welcome and thank you to our esteemed guest, the Right Honourable Clover Moore, Lord Mayor of the City of Sydney, for joining us tonight to be one of our speakers. So thank you, Clover. But before we hear from our great lineup of speakers tonight, I'd like to provide some background on the genesis of tonight's event. It started in 2016 as a response to the lack of equity in the built environment professions, paralleled in the faculty which I had recently joined as the first female dean, where I pledged to achieve 50% of women in leadership roles. More of that later. This initiative was established to not only redress the balance, but more importantly, to promote the diverse and extraordinary achievements and career paths of women in the built environment professions. Women graduate in almost equal numbers across all the built environment professions, from industrial design to planning, architecture, construction, and project management. However, there is not equal representation of women in leadership roles. We need to change this. There is often an attrition from the built environment professions as women's careers may be interrupted or stalled due to unequal opportunity. So we need to ensure we support women so they can realise the potential, whatever career path they choose. Women often pursue non-traditional paths as well, and yet achieve in equal measure in the full array of built environment professions, often excelling in unexpected ways. We need to recognise and celebrate this. So each year, we've asked professionals from industry, government, and academia across all the built environment professions to share their journeys and their achievements, what they're known for, how they got there, and what they offer in advice or maybe need to promote to help their cause. In the past 2 years at UNSW Built Environment, we've achieved a great deal. We now have more than 50% of women in our faculty leadership team, committees and panels, and we have about 50% women sessional staff as well, and that was not the case when I joined. We have promoted and appointed amazing leaders, including Professor Sissy Rotten, who's here tonight, and Professor of Practice Rachel Neeson, who will both be presenting tonight. So I'm thrilled for them to have joined us. We have also secured new opportunities, including 2 new PhD scholarships, especially for women, and 5 new Women in Construction scholarships, and we have 2 more to announce tonight. Beyond the university, our challenge is to get equal representation of women in leadership roles in built environment professions across the whole array of industry. And that requires working together in more innovative ways. This initiative is just but one step. This forum profiles the depth and breadth of women from all built environment disciplines, from early career to industry leaders. An event such as this is a great opportunity to acknowledge the achievements of women and their agile and often resilient professional career paths, particularly fitting and probably essential to the rapidly changing world in which we live, where we may have multiple roles in our lifetimes and work in areas not yet even imagined. It is one of the many initiatives that we're developing to support and foster women's career advancement in the university, in industry, and government, through mentoring, internships and graduate placement opportunities, teaching opportunities, research partnerships and scholarships, especially for women, to pursue their academic ambitions and professional development. So what have some of the presenters achieved since we last met? I'd just like to share some of the highlights that when we emailed out, people came back to us with. Caroline Pidcock, who's here tonight, has been appointed as chair of 1 Million Women. Good on you, Caroline. Scientia Fellow Hazel Easthope is now Associate Professor and Director of the Australian Housing and Urban Research Institute, AHURI. Jo Lees returned from maternity leave to deliver the AIA award-winning International House of Barangaroo as Construction Manager for Lend-Lease. Kirsten Stanich has been shortlisted for the Rig Design Prize and will exhibit at the National Gallery of Victoria in late 2018. Adjunct Professor Diane Jones is one of our first to enrol in the Built Environment practice-based PhD. Welcome, Diane. Bridget Smythe has been awarded the Bloomberg Leadership Exchange to study Indigenous recognition in cities. Kushlev McFadden and Jade Nottage of Tom Mark Henry were awarded Best Emerging Interior Design Practice at the World Interior Awards this year. And one of our popular highlights from last year, PhD Fatima Anapur, who presented her research on the gender difference in play spaces in schools, has been awarded her doctorate. Well done, Fatima. Dr. Nancy Marshall is now co-leading a federally funded Smart Cities grant on investigating the role of sensors in the use and management of public space, which has already attracted international attention. And last but not least, Professor Susan Thompson received the 2017 Australian Urban Research Medal. Well deserved. And there are many other highlights. So now let's find out what the highlights are for tonight from the speakers that we have here. Please join me in giving a big round of applause to our speakers, and our first speaker, Dr. Chrissy Steinmetz from UNSW.
I'm an example of someone who took the non-traditional route to the built environment disciplines. I grew up in a small riverfront town just north of Detroit. It was an idyllic childhood, but life really didn't get started until I got to Arizona State University. I got the degree, but I also got a job that I didn't particularly like. What I did like was travel, so I stepped out into the world. My first stop was Barcelona, where I obtained an international teaching certificate. From there, I went to Hong Kong, where I taught English and drama to school children. That inspired me to do a master's degree in education at the University of Edinburgh. It was there that I experienced the sheer magnitude and measure of being amongst scholars. What a privilege it was to study in a medieval university whose alumni included Alexander Graham Bell, Charles Darwin, and, well, Pippa Middleton. So the university, its campus, and placement within the city, this is where I wanted to be. I wanted to be surrounded by youthful energy, new ideas, and a constantly changing landscape of people. I continue this love affair with the university today. At the University of Edinburgh, I spent my master's degree exploring the built environment of the university, a solid foundation that continues in my work today. But after completing my degree, I spun the globe and ended up here in my future home, Australia. Here I undertook my PhD at University of New South Wales. My research tracked 3 generations of Australian university graduates and unpacked how they belonged to and connected to their university. But after spending 10 years of my life and 3 degrees in 3 different countries, it was time to stop being a student. I began by establishing myself as an expert in generational attitudes, about generational attitudes to university life through publications, conferences, lectures, and I was offered a job to teach in the city planning program at the University of New South Wales. So I wrote a book, some articles, and in between, I won a few awards along the way. I was visiting professor at the University of Chile, and within all of this fun stuff, I saved up all my holidays, I took a month off from university, and walked the Camino de Santiago. But that's not what I'm known for. I'm known for bringing my whole self to work in my interactions with students, colleagues, external partners. So my research for the past 10 years has been diverse, but really underpinned by the stage on which all of this happens, a city. My work has covered everything from built form of campuses, student experiences, adult entertainment venues, nighttime economy, and now my most recent research on Tel Aviv with the Tel Aviv Foundation and its municipality. I spent a significant amount of time in Tel Aviv and recently 3 months while on my sabbatical immersing myself in their smart city. So now I'm combining my interest in Tel Aviv with the Smart Social Spaces research team in the built environment, which Helen just mentioned. Last year, we were awarded a very large grant from the Department of Industry, Innovation, and Science and the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet. And we're working with Georges River Councils on how they can become a smarter city. So my life, my work, my collaborators, both domestically and internationally, they're aligning, not because I had a 5-year plan, but because of the following ethos that I prescribe to. Be authentic with yourself and with others. Be philanthropic, give to your alma mater, and give to your community in whatever capacity makes sense to you and to your discipline. Be purposeful in what you do and make things count. And finally, a last bit of advice. Find your life's passion and your life work. Make them coexist. It's out there.
Hi, I'm Lee Hilum. I'm an architect. I graduated from the University of New South Wales in 1997. And sorry, I should have worked out how this works. There we go. I'm from a place called Illabo, and a farming family, and this has had an influence on my architecture in that I feel like I'm always comparing in an existential way what my parents do with what I do. They're farmers, so they feed people. It's essential and it's necessary, and I'm an architect. But I've always looked for the architecture that I felt is essential and necessary. Through my degree and afterwards, I was lucky enough to work with Richard Laplastrier. I worked on the drawings for his house and then as a carpenter's assistant or a lackey in building it. That experience gave me the confidence as a designer, and it showed me that there's no need for gender stereotypes on building sites. The blokes that I worked with, Rick, Jeffrey Broadfield and Jonathan Temple, are feminists, and I think they liked the opportunity to prove it, which they did by completely ignoring the fact that I was a woman. Now, I wasn't their equal because I didn't have a clue and I didn't have their experience, but for no other reason. I went on to build a few more houses with this team, but eventually was distracted by the idea of doing my own thing and set up as a sole practitioner. With no experience of working in an architect's office, Rick and I had worked out of a tent, after all. Possibly, nowadays, I'm known for 3 things. I started a practice, Dunn & Hilum Architects, with my partner Ashley Dunn 18 years ago, and we've had a great bunch of people work with us in the office over the years. These are some of our projects, including our own studio. The common themes around our work, I think, are a clear construction and honest approach to honest materials, sustainability, regional projects, heritage and cultural work. This is one of our better known projects, which is Junee Library, has showing our massive insulated tanks that run a night sky cooling system, which is one of my favourite bits, not the most architectural element. Secondly, I have a role at the Government Architect New South Wales. I work to champion, connect and advise across the whole built environment industry to promote the value of good design. I hope the work that we're doing there is pushing the role of architects, urban designers and landscape architects into much greater positions of leadership and influence in our world. And finally, I may be known by some of you for my advocacy for equity in architecture. I was on the Institute's National Gender Equity Committee for 3 years and the chair for the last one. And I've written a few articles for Parlour and spoken at a few events, mostly around the damage the long work hours culture does to us all, men and women, and what a load of nonsense it all is. What I've learnt in negotiating the various challenges of being a woman and a mother and having ambitions to have work that is interesting and feels essential is that you need a multi-pronged approach. You must lean in and be fierce and speak up and all of the rest of that. But sometimes you can also be silent. A long, uncomfortable period of silence when being confronted by a mansplainer on a building site can be quite effective. You give them enough rope to hang themselves with, as they say. That's kind of macabre. Finally, I think work hard and never apologise for going home. And I came up with a few things that I'll do in order to help us all achieve this goal of 50-50 women. But the main one, I think, is that I'd like to help women identify what they're good at so that they can build on that. And it sounds like a simple thing, but I received some advice like this recently, and I felt like it was really helpful, so I'm going to pass it on.
Thank you for having me. It's so good to be here to support Helen's vision for 50-50 women in leadership roles. I should do the clicker. They were kind of an afterthought after I figured out what I was going to speak about. I went to uni to study biotechnology. I didn't actually want to study biotechnology. I actually went to university to get away from the small town that I grew up in. Lucky for me, when I got there, I discovered engineering and eventually construction. To get a job in construction, it was a little bit harder, some 20 years ago. I had to offer for free, that I would work for free. I was pretty lucky that I did get my foot in the door, but to be honest, I haven't actually looked back since. I've worked for some amazing companies, some exceptional leaders, and I've been a part of a few firsts myself. Generally for the companies I work for, and not for what, when I was growing up, I would be first for. First project manager, or first construction manager, first construction director, operations manager, and I sit on my company's executive team. When I asked my team what I was known for, they weren't actually the things that I actually thought that I was known for. Because I thought, you know what, I'm pretty resilient, I'm patient, I know I'm competitive. But it turns out that I'm actually good at helping people work on their strengths and focusing on them rather than their weaknesses. I'm a problem solver, and I look to the bigger picture. So what we might get caught up in today is really insignificant when we're trying to get to the long game. That was actually a bit of a surprise for me. What will I leave you with today? I guess a couple of things that I've learnt. I'm not confident. I'm tall, so I have some presence. I'm so not confident. But the only way that you will get there is if you have to have a go. So you just step out there, take that chance. You don't actually have to have all the skills to do the job. Honestly, that is what on-the-job learning is all about. One thing that I like to do to include women in the built environment in my places of work or where I'm networking is I look for the best candidate. And then when that successful candidate comes into that space that we're working in, I like to mentor them and coach them and foster them with opportunities within the area that they're working in or what they're doing. One thing that we can all do is actually we can make more room at the table. Because if we really actually want to get to 50-50, we all need to play our part. Thank you.
So I'm Anita Morandini, and Port Campus Steelworks was a backdrop to my upbringing, respectful of difference. My mother, the singular Australian amongst an extended Italian family making good in the lucky country, graduating as an architect from Sydney University in 1989. I was led by this indelible impression of a building designed by Mireille Spinoz, and I headed straight for Barcelona. I arrived with no job, no contacts, no network, nor Catalan. It was a kind of strategic recklessness which completely left me open to possibility. And it was the beginning of my life immersed in vastly different architectural philosophies. In Spain, drawing archery facilities for the 1990 Olympics taught me the power of abstraction. Singapore, designing a hotel, mentored in the intangible aspects of architecture, light, air, sound, and touch. And in Holland, documenting an arts academy, I gleaned that a single building influencing its greater context becomes the catalyst for placemaking. 5 years ago, awarded a Bara Hadley Scholarship, I visited Copenhagen to further my research on integrating environmental, social, and economic aspects in design to create high-quality places. It highlighted just as important as design are the innovations in public policy to promote integration and to stimulate investment in good design. Today, as design manager at the City of Sydney, I lead a program of competitions devised to foster the highest standards in architecture and urban design. The program embraces diversity, each competition involving 3 to 5 participating architects and jurors to select the best scheme for a site. And it's a powerful comparative process where evaluation of design options often reveals latent opportunities that may not have otherwise been identified. So Venturi and Scott Brown were a great influence on my generation. That's giving a bit away. Together they straddled architecture and planning with imagination. This image so suggestive of their different perspectives. So in the competition space, how do we bring diverse experience to the table? There are countless women involved in design, but I rarely see their presence. As women, we need to be present. If you've made a significant contribution to a design, insist on having a voice in the presentation. Become a juror. Your perspective is needed. Seek a mentor, practice critique and peer review. Partner for impact. Don't be hostage to a lack of experience. Find a collaborating firm. Your aggregate experience may just be the winning combination. And always remember, you are not just a resource, you are an asset.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. My name is Katherine. I am the co-founder and CEO of a company called Respia. But before I get into that, I'd like to acknowledge the original custodians of the land and also thank you, Bridie, for including me among such accomplished women. So my background is industrial design, and I graduated from UNSW in 2016. And I'm going to be speaking about my honours year project. But before that, when I graduated, I went into industry and I had experience in a lot of different fields. So my first gig was at a place called McConaughey Boats Australia, and I did some carbon fibre yacht manufacturing there, and that was a really amazing place, but it wasn't totally in line. So then I went on to do some architectural hardware design, even a little bit of furniture, and then consultancy work. And you can see more about my work at designbykk.com. But after 2 years of that, in the meantime, I had applied into several design competitions such as Red Dot, James Dyson Award, and Good Design. And I was really humbled to have won awards in these competitions, which really gave my career a bit of a spark. And so I was getting a lot of traction and hype around my honours year project, Respia. And I like to talk about, it's a bit of an impromptu MBA because I've been learning so much about business as well. So since August last year, I've been working full-time on my own company. So Respia is an asthma management system. It picks up the early signs of asthma before they are physically noticeable and still treatable at home. So it creates a communicative link between parent and child and helps parents really make informed decisions about what is the best next step in a child's asthma management. So my key takeaways for women early in their careers are to, first of all, take every opportunity that you can get, because women are chronically self-doubters, and it's been seen through studies that men of similar capacity in their career will go for those opportunities, whereas women won't. I really encourage you to go ahead, and I've had an opportunity where I didn't, and I regret it, and I'll never do it again. So always take it. So I think that's first of all. And then my second piece of advice is that assess your opportunity, because eventually as your career starts to kick off, you're going to have limited time. So just make sure that whatever you do is in line with your goal and really takes you forward to what your vision is. So today I'm seeking an advisor who has entrepreneurial spirit and experience in a medtech commercialization. and that would have equity included. And today I am offering a research collaboration for anyone interested in doing research in respiratory health data collection and a publication. Thank you so much for listening.
Hello, I'm a lecturer in interior architecture at UNSW Built Environment, and I would like to talk tonight about being strategic. I think that that's a word that often has some negative connotations, especially if applied to a woman. It can sound a little bit ruthless or a little bit uncreative or even a little bit mean. But really, I think that it should be a compliment, because being strategic means that you recognise the importance of your peers. We can't really achieve anything without working collaboratively with those around us. And to me, being strategic means identifying opportunities to put maximum time and effort into projects that will bring benefit to the most number of people. So what does that have to do with Oscar? That's a very good question, because after graduating from university, I read one of those motivational brochures that you find in the doctor's surgery, and it said, if something scares you, do it, which I took extremely literally and bought a ticket to Paris, where I knew nobody, similar story, and ended up very luckily working in the office of Christian de Posenbach, who is a Pritzker Prize-winning architect and had a communications team, and at the time was designing the Oscars Museum in Hollywood for Steven Spielberg. And it was a really engaging experience, and I'd like to say not just for the celebrity factor, although that was kind of fun, but mostly because I gained an understanding of the breadth of impact that people can achieve through communication. So, on dragging myself back to Sydney, I turned that interest into a PhD on celebrity, and I unpacked the influence and the impact of architects on the profession. I then moved into a role as a workplace strategist, where I furthered that into understanding knowledge transfer and trust in the workplace, which then brought me to my current roles, the first of which is as a councillor on North Sydney Council. And I got a bit excited on day one with the selfies. So I'd like to take the opportunity to mention that although we don't achieve gender equity in government on any level, it's quite exciting that Randwick City Council, where our campus is based, and City of Sydney Council and North Sydney Council all have very strong female mayors. And without playing favourites, excuse me, Lord Mayor, Julie from North Sydney is a particular role model for myself, not only as my mayor, but also as my mum. Hi, Mum. So, my other main role as lecturer at UNSW is in educating people. So that's where my first opportunity for impact lies. But in the last couple of months, I've had a great opportunity with leaders in our faculty, with Helen Lochhead, with Bruce Watson, with Diana Alec, to broaden the impact of teaching and move into developing an online training platform for our sessional staff. And it's so exciting that we've achieved close to 50% gender equity there. So the training resource boosts the skills of educators, and in doing so allows that impact to roll on to the learning experience of the 2,500 students that we have in our faculty. So if I could end on some advice for anyone in the room who would like to have impact on the next generation of built environment practitioners, come and join us as a sessional staff member. It'd be a very strategic move. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Oi Chung. When I was growing up in Malaysia in the 50s and 60s, Hakka women immigrants from southern China, distinguished by their trademark red headgear and blue outfits, were ubiquitous on construction sites, carrying soil, debris, building materials, and concrete as labourers. Although they were the lowest in the pecking order, these resilient, hardworking women helped to build the country's infrastructure and architectural legacy and are now being celebrated as national treasures in Singapore and Malaysia, where they first made their home. Perhaps one day our collaborative contributions as women in the built environment will enjoy the same resonance and recognition in our national pantheon. I have made my career in the past 35 years as a landscape architect and urban designer, but I came upon it in a slightly roundabout way. Graduating in architecture from Sydney University in the mid-1970s, I started work as an architect in the New South Wales Government Architects Office, where there was also a fledgling landscape section. Inspired by the work of the early pioneers of the profession and former tutors at university like Glenn Murcutt, who brought a new sensitivity in designing with the Australian landscape, I embarked upon postgraduate degrees in landscape design and environmental studies. I ended up not only becoming a landscape architect, but running the landscape section. In the mid-1980s, with a combined team of 45 landscape architects and technical officers, it was the largest landscape office in the Southern Hemisphere, and I'm proud to say the incubator of many of the established landscape architectural practices in Australia today. In 1990, I founded a new landscape practice, Context, a sister practice to Conobie Morrison, one of the first multidisciplinary architecture, urban design, planning and landscape offices in Australia. I stepped down as a director 4 years ago and have reinvented myself as a freelance consultant. In my so-called third act, I have continued to explore the value of holistic design in local and international projects, actively engaging on design excellence panels, competition juries, and giving back in a pro bono capacity in advisory roles to government, educational establishments, professional institutions, and mentoring young landscape architects. My career pathway has been an exhilarating journey corresponding with the maturity of the landscape profession in Australia and the rise in the skills and voice of landscape architects to influence primary directions in planning, lifestyle, decisions making, and environmental management. Today, the input of landscape architects is valued and included in many fields of planning advocacy and design. But in the last century, literally, we had to fight hard to create a seat at the table where there was none. I have been lucky in that my profession has allowed me to get my own benchmarks and engage in fields where I've been passionate about rejuvenating cities and sites, maintaining the primacy of the public domain, and in particular, the conservation of our heritage and national landscapes. Working as an architect in the forefront of city making has given me the opportunity to collaborate on a very broad spectrum of works locally and overseas. And I'd like to share some of the lessons that I've learned with you tonight. First thing is to say yes more often and just turn up. Some of the best things that have happened to me in my career have not been the result of mapped places, but of being open and responsive to just saying yes and then showing up. Make the choice. As someone once famously said, 80% of success is just showing up. Secondly, form great relationships and surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. Network, 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 and find mentors who can inspire, teach, and challenge you. For after a while, a little of their luster will inevitably dust upon you. And finally, embrace your vulnerability, as many of our speakers have said. As women, we often undersell ourselves for fear of being judged lacking and inadequate for the task. I have come to understand that over the years, our experience of vulnerability, of overcoming this adversity, of taking risks, is actually the most accurate measurement of our courage. Embrace vulnerability as a positive agent in yourself and your career. For, to quote Brené Brown, vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, adaptation, and change. Good luck, women in the built environment, and let's work together. Collectively, we have so much more power to be innovative and imagine better. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Papadopoulos and I'm coming to you today as President of the Construction and Property Society at UNSW. Growing up, I was the only girl among my cousins and brother for years and was often told by my family that I had to be careful playing with the boys and that if I tried to keep up with them that I would get hurt. This is a scenario that I'm sure a lot of women in our audience can relate to, particularly when applied to working in our industry. The difference is, however, that my cousin's brother and I were children and that getting hurt meant often being pushed into a bush in the backyard. However, in university and the workplace, we are dealing with adults, careers and sexism. At 17, being a year younger than my cohort and not knowing what career path I wanted to follow as the first person in my family to go to university, I chose to begin studying a Bachelor of International Studies. And at 19, with $20,000 worth of HECS debt, I realised that it wasn't for me. After a semester off, a couple more online career quizzes, and another review of the UAT guide, I finally came across the Bachelor of Construction Management and Property degree at UNSW. In hindsight, it's amazing that nobody picked up my passion for construction and property. When I was younger, I used to recruit my grandfather to help me saw timber in the backyard to construct a tree house. My school nights I look forward to watching The Simpsons and The Block with my parents. And from the age of about 15, had an obsession with watching the local housing prices fluctuate on realestate.com. And the domain app, so that's just a few of my fond childhood memories. Fast forward to today as a 22-year-old. In preparation of this speech, we were asked to discuss our greatest achievement, and I'd say that this is it. I've worked for global companies on multi-million-dollar projects, which I'm proud to say as a 22-year-old is a great achievement so far. But to be the voice of young women that don't yet know they need a voice and need to be spoken for is my greatest achievement. In my opinion, we have two issues that are closely related and need to be addressed. Firstly, we need to propose construction and property-related careers as an option for female high school students, and we need to strongly bring this to their attention and soon. We need to get out to schools, show girls who we are, what we do, and offer an insight to potential careers that they don't know exist that would be fulfilling to them and beneficial to our communities. I myself did not realise that there was more to construction in the property field beyond being a tradie, an architect or real estate agent, until I was already $20,000 in HECS debt. We need to showcase the courses relating to construction and the built environment industry and give guidance to young girls the way most of us wish we would have had. Secondly, by increasing the number of females enrolled in construction courses, we increase interactions between males and females at the university level so that once they enter the workplace, they've already adapted to a more gender diverse environment, thereby tackling the second issue of creating a cohesive, positive, gender diverse workplace and industry. Lastly, while addressing these issues, particularly in the construction industry, we need to remind young women that their femininity is not defined by their careers. Moving forward as president of CAPS, I hope to set up initiatives and programs with the assistance of firms that share the same goal of encouraging young women into the industry. For my career, I hope to constantly grow my leadership skills, expand my knowledge, fine-tune my critical thinking and feed my interests in property acquisitions, developments and large-scale construction projects, all the while keeping up with the boys. Thanks.
I'm Rachel Neeson. Thank you for the invitation, and it's great to be so inspired by these great speakers. I completed my 2 undergraduate degrees in architecture at the University of Sydney. About a year after graduating, I started working with Philip Thallis on urban projects. Many of you would know Philip Thallis. He's a councillor with the City of Sydney. I loved the whole of city thinking. It felt very worthwhile. But it takes decades for an urban plan to come to fruition, and I was impatient to feel the reality of spaces that I might have had a hand in. So whilst with Philip, I started working part-time on my own little residential projects. Kitchens, bathrooms, modest extensions, designing them, documenting them and seeing them built. I talk about my microwave moment. One day when I'd spent 4 hours trying to work out how to fit the microwave into a kitchen, and suddenly I thought, has my architectural career come to this? It was at that moment I knew I needed to work on public projects. It's true. I completed a master's in architecture in Barcelona. When I returned, my late husband, Nicholas Merkert, and I joined our separate residential practices with the intent of pursuing public work together. First public commissions come through a leap of faith on behalf of your clients. Our first opportunities came through Sydney Olympic Parklands with the Shipwreck Lookout, a tiny little project, and with the City of Sydney with Prince Alfred Park and Pool, not such a tiny project. Neeson Merkert is now a practice of 13. It includes my new partner, Stephen Neal, and we continue to work on a variety of public and private projects, a variety of project types and a variety of scales, and we still do houses. So what are we known for? We're one of few smaller practices to have been awarded professional accolade across a diverse range of categories: urban design, public, heritage, interior, residential architecture, and education. So perhaps you could say we're known for our agility. I'd like to be known for caring and taking care. So as practitioners, we make places that host human activity. To this end, in my view, it all matters. The urban strategy matters, the architectural strategy matters, and the detail strategy also matters. I'd also like to be known for a lightness of spirit, that the places we design can be uplifting places, places that in some way make us feel good. Takeaways and helping others. I have a great deal of respect for all the academics in the room. Teaching is a very giving profession. We have some wonderful young women working with us, and we have had many over the years. And I'm now very conscious of my close at hand role modelling. The actual day-to-day practice of architecture is a messy whirlpool of uncertainty. So we help our staff be comfortable with this fluidity and not to be overwhelmed by it. We actively support them in not being bullied by the no-can-doers, in holding tight to good strategies when they're found, and in helping them to help others see things more laterally. So, for example, a young architect in our office at the moment on a domestic job, on-site, time-pressured, supporting her tenacity to resist a subcontractor's business-as-usual installation to work through a beautiful solution. Or another young project architect in our office on a larger public project, supporting her in holding the design line with decisions in big meetings with clients and consultants, including the odd dissenting consultant. And another young architect's first time ever running a job on site, shying initially, but enthusiastically encouraged and completing the project, which then went on to win the Robin Boyd Award at national level. So I think of this as grounded confidence giving, and helping these women become aware of their skills, their intelligence and their intuitions, and to trust them is how we try to help others. Thank you.
Wow, you look wonderful from here. Okay, sorry, I'm Sissy Rotten, and I'm coming really kind of long way to here. Actually, I'm born in Bulgaria, and I graduated at that university in Sofia. And, you know, I'm from an engineering background. My whole family is engineers, so I had to finish something like that. I finished engineering. Boys, 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 boys. But I finished as a second in my course, and as a second in the whole university and first in my course. So, in a way, when it was hard work and I was thinking, okay, now I'm not going to see anything anymore about university. And I went working. And I was working for 5 years. I find it really kind of boring. And I said, okay, let's go back to the university. And I applied for a position at the same university. And they give me teaching. And again, at a certain moment, I said, oh, but this is, again, very boring. And I applied to do a PhD. And I got a fellowship. I went to Netherlands. Wonderful place. You see, I was for 4 years in this beautiful university, and because I had 2 different supervisors from 2 different disciplines, so I was had so lucky to travel continuously between another beautiful university, Graz Technical University, and to get my PhD from there. Okay, when I finished, I was thinking, okay, now what? Again, everywhere, boys. And I got applied for several different places, and I got accepted for a very nice, wonderful project, augmented reality, as a postdoc. And augmented reality back in 2000, it was really kind of something very, very, very exciting. So I went to Delft, and again, it was a nice place, and I stayed a long time there, almost 18 years. But at a certain moment, I got invited by this very beautiful university that I'm now here, and I decided to move here. And I must say, this is a great place to work with 50% women. It's really different. Being all the time with men, this is really something. Okay, story, what I'm known about. This is about 3D geographic information. I started modeling the real world many years ago, and in a way I'm one of the first doing 3D modeling, and also probably the first women that is doing 3D GIS. My PhD was the first on this topic. And this 3D affected everybody, my family, my relatives, everybody. And this is a story from my second son. I have 3 sons, boys. Once he came to my office when I was doing my PhD, and I told him, okay, wait a minute, I have to finish something because I'm doing these 3D models and I'm developing code and I have to finish it. And he said, okay, but sat behind me, and after half an hour, he came back with this picture. And he said, okay, this is 3D, right? And I said, yes. So, you're ready, let's go home. And as a courtesy of this really kind of very fantastic moment, I put his picture on my PhD. And actually, the funny thing is that this publication, I have a lot of publications, this publication is still one of the most cited, more than 300 citations to this publication. And I think this is because of the picture. Now what I'm doing, I did all kind of things related to 3D, and now I'm going indoor. This is not a bad picture, but photo, but this is a point cloud, and every of these dots that you see there, they're kind of points about which we know everything. So I moved from modeling the 3D world from outside to modeling the 3D world inside. And what I want to do this evening, to make more contacts with more women. I have a great team of young, very enthusiastic guys. They're all boys. So I'm looking for girls and for women that want to go with me through all this trajectory, to go to 3D, to have smart models, make them realistic, reusable, interoperable, to be able to have our smart cities. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Tania Vincent. My interest in urbanism started with Lego cities, a plastic train set, and drawing house plans on the back of my mother's accountancy spreadsheets in her office. I graduated from UNSW with a Bachelor of Architecture honours degree. I was very lucky in my first 2 jobs to get an excellent urban design apprenticeship from Rod Simpson, David Chesterman and Clive Alcock. Work on the Olympic Athletes Village led to specialty work in new urbanist design and master planning. And I still get great satisfaction from visiting those suburbs, and I like to think being a little bit more walkable and attractive through my contribution. I wanted to be better informed about the human evidence behind the built environment, the what works and why, so I completed a master's in social science while living in London. Now this is where the story gets complicated. I have 3 beautiful children, now teenagers, and rather than saying I only had part-time jobs, I'm going to say that for 10 very busy years, I held down 2 jobs. My experience widened to planning and policy roles with the Urban Design Advisory Service, then Landcom, and later JBA, now Ethos, and I qualified as a registered planner. In 2011, I became a Churchill Fellow for my research and advocacy on family-friendly, high-density neighbourhoods, and particularly the Copenhagen Playards. Today, I'm with Transport for New South Wales, and my main urban design project there has been the Sydney Light Rail project. So, urban design is all about sliding up and down the scales from city to details and being able to bridge between design and planning and indeed other disciplines. The projects I have enjoyed the most are really the ones in the middle. Built projects that have pioneered a new approach with a citywide implication. Now, light rail is an obvious one, but I'm going to steer clear of that one tonight. Another favourite would be the Lancome's 21st Century Living Project. So I was part of a small team that created the subdivision in North Penrith. It designed with AJC and built the first Torrens title terrace housing on the house on land delivery model, leading to the new SEP that eventually became the housing diversity package for those missing middle densities, so crucial at the metropolitan scale. Outside of my day job, and what I would like to be known for, is for bringing Playards back to Sydney and improving high-density living for families for generations to come. So I am currently part of an advocacy team organising a pilot project. My key takeaways for helping other women. My most empowering realisation was that our wider industry is not a meritocracy. This fractal image reminds me that our individual stories are part of a much bigger repeating pattern, and that women won't overcome the systemic barriers through only individual efforts to work harder, be better qualified, or network further. It's a really wicked problem that needs collective action from everyone and not just women. This is best summed up for me by this author, Catherine Fox, in her book, Stop Fixing Women. It inspired me to get involved in Transport's Diversity and Inclusion Council, and I led a qualitative research project on women's experience of the glass ceiling in our organisation. And those findings then led to a series of events and new actions that have started to achieve a more inclusive work culture within that very large organisation. So those three childhood elements, the Lego cities, the train sets, and a feminist mother, are still with me. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Georgia Harvey. I'm an interior designer. I studied interior architecture at the University of New South Wales, and I graduated in 2010. I was then very lucky quite soon after finishing university to land my dream job with SJB Interiors in Sydney at the beginning of 2011, and I've been there ever since. I became associate in 2014. I've been part of the team while it's grown from 5 to 15 people and been involved in some incredible projects along the way. I have the pleasure of working with this very talented team of designers in this photograph and under the leadership of two amazing directors, Kirsten Stanisic and Jonathan Richards. All of these people I learn from every single day. I was there with the team when they won Designer of the Year at 2 major industry events last year, which was really exciting. And I consider myself at the beginning of what I hope to be a very long career in interior design. During my time at SJB, I've been project designer on some of our key projects. Chifley is one of these projects. So Chifley Plaza in Sydney CBD underwent a major refurbishment that was completed in 2016. And it saw 3 levels of retail, hospitality, and third space reimagined. I was involved with the project right through to completion with finishes, joinery, some major planning changes, furniture, shop fronts, and some new major ceiling structures. The Buena Vista Hotel in Mossman, affectionately known as the Buna by the locals, is a personal favourite of mine. We transformed a tired but iconic pub in the heart of Mossman into something that the locals could be proud of again, with a refurbished public bar, rooftop bar, and a new build restaurant and wine bar. We took the project from DA right through to completion and styling. and it got a nomination at the World Interior Design Awards for Best Restaurant and Bar, which was amazing. No win, but it was great to be there. So I hope to continue to be involved in projects of this calibre and play a vital role in their outcome. I'm lucky to have always been surrounded by women through my studies of interior design and in the office, but being on a construction site and being the only woman and interacting with the wider industry on a day-to-day basis where the minority is hard. So I've learned in these situations that perseverance is key, getting in there and sticking with it and showing people what you're capable of. So I can help other women to do this through mentoring and through our internship programs within the office and through our constant connections with great universities such as UNSW and our involvement with courses such as interior architecture. But I think I have to always remember to be a role model to my colleagues and to students and to maybe others in the interior design industry. And I'll continue to learn from all of my peers, all of the women and men in the industry that are working hard and continuing to do some great things. Thank you.
I'm Suzanne Tambor and I lead ASBEC, the Australian Sustainable Built Environment Council. I've always been passionate about social and environmental justice. This comes from my dad, Tony, who, along with being a relentless entrepreneur, was a community leader and a social justice campaigner. When I finished school, I commenced an arts degree at university where I was a really keen protester against globalisation, corporatisation, privatisation and any isation I could lay my hands on and march against. But I soon determined that if I wanted to make a difference, I needed to better understand the forces I was pushing against. So in the spirit at the time of Know Thine Enemy, I switched to a Bachelor of Business in Marketing, where I quickly figured that there was no real enemy. They're mostly just people trying to get by in a confusing world. Throughout my 20s, I roamed through several sectors, including retail, manufacturing, consultancies and government. And whilst in government, my boss, John Rimmer, woke me up to the world of big ideas and motivated me to undertake postgraduate studies in strategic foresight. I eventually landed in the NGO sector, working closely with CEO Don Henry at the Australian Conservation Foundation. Don taught me one of my favourite sayings: it's amazing what you can accomplish as long as you don't care who gets the credit. His approach to dialogue and diplomacy helped me define my vocational passion, collaboration and building alliances. However, I still couldn't envisage myself as capable of inhabiting a leadership role. In a big way, this was because the people who impressed me in my early years were all men. They gave me a vision of what leadership could look like, and I deeply admired them. I just couldn't translate this into a vision of what leadership might look like for me. So my comfort zone was strictly in the background. Several years ago, I was fortunate enough to land a role with ASBEC, where I get to do what I really love: coordinate a collaborative forum of peak organisations to advance a more sustainable, livable and resilient built environment. Through ASBEC, I have worked with members including the Green Building Council of Australia, the Property Council, the City of Sydney and the CRC for Low Carbon Living to develop and advocate evidence-based policy on issues including higher energy efficiency standards for buildings and better decision-making processes for infrastructure delivery. ASBEC is where I've been lucky enough to meet a range of female leaders who really pushed me to find my voice in the national conversation about sustainability and led me to aspire to be a more prominent leader. I wouldn't be where I am today without great mentors. They convinced me to step out of the background and claim my space in this sector. Without the support of Romilly Maju, Jane Montgomery-Greba, Bronwyn Evans, Megan Motto and Monica Richter, I would never have stepped up in this role, and I owe it to them to pay it forward. I'm keen to build collaborative networks to advance sustainability in the built environment. I'm keen to promote synergies by connecting people, and of course, I'm keen to assist with guidance and mentoring. I have to admit, this is a selfish agenda because I have young twin girls. And what I really want is for female leadership to be something they can just take for granted by the time they've grown up.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ida Afruz. As a kid, I was always passionate about designing and making things, like playing with Lego, designing bridges. I used to make small bridges over the ditch in our garden using different layers of sand, mud, leaves. I was also dreaming about being a pilot. Later, I noticed it was not being the pilot itself that intrigued me, but traveling and visiting different cities. Now I found out it was designing cities that I was always passionate about it. My journey has been an interesting one. Each stage of my academic life has been in a different country. I was born in Mashhad, Iran, and I did my undergraduate there in urban engineering. Then I traveled to Malaysia and I did my master's degree there in urban design. After that, I went back home and worked for a couple of years as an urban designer in a private consultancy before pursuing my PhD at the Faculty of Built Environment, UNSW. I want to be known for eye tracking studies, particularly the visually impaired, wayfinding and navigation studies. I did my PhD on wayfinding using an eye tracking methodology. I've also got so far 2 grants from City of Sydney and Department of Industry to take voucher on wayfinding. Also, I'm interested in 3D modeling, GIS, spatial and statistical analysis, and finally, augmented reality sandbox. For instance, this image shows the Malabar headlands that my participants molded on the sandbox when they were designing trails. What I want to do, and I want help from you, is to get rid of these braille pavements. Don't make a mistake, I want it for good. Let's think about a replacement for tactile pavement for the visually impaired. Why? I think the most vulnerable users of our built environment are the visually impaired. I interviewed some blind and low vision students to find out how they navigate in a city. Guess what they said? They suffered from walking on these pavements. They are not available everywhere, and more importantly, they hurt their feet when walking on them for a long time. Have you ever tried walking on them? I want to help the visually impaired users of the built environment using emerging technology, mobile applications, infrared sensors at bus stops, and so on. Please let me know if anyone can help me in achieving this goal and in piloting this change in Australia and all over the world. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Felicity Stewart, and I'm Director of Architecture and Urban Design Practice, Stuart Hollenstein. Please forgive me, I'm quite sick, but I really wanted to be here, so bear with me. My parents told me to get a skill and make some change. This is my career in a short dot point list from top to bottom. I'm from Canberra, a city of very spread out people, and I think that's why I so much enjoy community and coming together. I went from fine arts at COFA to interior architecture and then across to architecture. So I found my way eventually. I worked for Dunn and Hilum Architects and have my old boss who's spoken previously. I've tried different work at Bates Smart, and I came to the realisation that I wanted to think bigger. So I spent some time at Columbia University, very fortunately, studying urban design, went on to bigger work at Hassel, and then was lucky enough to win the competition for Green Square Library and Plaza, which we're currently now delivering. And that project launched our practice, Stuart Hollenstein, which I have with my former student friend, an old friend now, Matthias Hollenstein. So now we have employees, we go on to bigger projects, we're looking at master plans, more competitions, which is fun, and now the biggest challenge, which is doing all that and being a mother. I like to think that our practice, Stuart Hollenstein, is gaining a reputation for projects that have public benefit. We believe in architecture and cities which provide for all people, and we believe good design can be a vehicle for joy. In 2013, as I mentioned, we won the project for Green Square Library and Plaza, and I'm proud to mention that it'll open in a couple of months. Since then, we've embarked on a range of projects from master planning to hospitality and education, and I'm proud by the range of work that we are producing and the territory which we're pushing ourselves into as designers. And I'm proud to have Rothio, Lucy and Mia from our studio here tonight. Personally, I want to be known as a designer who listens, a designer who solves problems, who thinks big and outside of the box, who unlocks potential, a designer who presents ideas to other people with so much passion that I'm on the verge of tears when I present. There's nothing more satisfying than walking into a presentation with an idea that you absolutely believe in. Our aim is to find the meaning and value in all of our projects, no matter how big or small, and to carve out space for community. I heard the other day that the number of Australians now living alone is as high as 1 in 4 living solo. So what does this figure mean for communities? And what does it mean for places where we come together? I thought it was fun to just share my calendar this week. This is a bit of a whinge, so bear with me. But in terms of key takeaways, I want the women in this room who are attempting to have meaningful careers whilst raising a family that I hear you. And I understand that the struggle is real. I've been sick for the last few days and am struggling to get on top of my schedule whilst raising a family, but I wanted to be here tonight to share in everyone's stories, and I'm finding it really heartening to hear them all. So I could go on a rant right now about how childcare should be free, how the workday should be more flexible, how part-time work should be acceptable, whether you're an assistant or a CEO, how society needs to shift to recognise that women are not men, and that we need to value the work of mothers and what they're contributing to society, but I'll try to stop myself. I am navigating my way. I'm not sure where it's going, but through family, community and work. And I'd love to talk with anyone who has ideas about how to achieve that. Thank you very much for having me.
Good evening. I'm Elisa Palazzo, UNSW Built Environment. So when I was a young girl, I really wanted to be an astronaut. It's a sad story. Somebody told me that it was not the case for my generation, and being a woman and being an astronaut, that was completely not possible. So I got so disappointed that I decided to change completely the target of my interest. I went down into Earth, and I've decided to become an architect. So my main field of interest as an architect is actually urban landscape. So urban landscape is not an oxymoron, it's not a contradiction of terms, it's actually what we need, and we need for our city. We need more green spaces in our growing urban areas. So I have explored this very thin boundary since my degree in architecture, and afterwards as a registered architect, planner, and landscape architect. So with my own design office, I received many awards. I built projects, realized plans across Europe, China, Middle East, and now Australia. Then I've decided at a certain point to enroll in a PhD, and my PhD was actually, the title or topic was actually landscape and urban design. And since then, landscape and urban design is actually the common thread that is going through all my work, and in particular also as an academic in my research and teaching. In particular, I'm interested in how landscapes became a part of our cities, and how this is contributing to improve their resilience, help to mitigate and adapt to climate change, manage flooding, improve urban livability and sustainability. And I'm particularly interested into the relationship between green corridors and urban mobility corridors. You noticed I always use the term landscape. I never use the term green infrastructures or nature-based solutions, because I really would like to highlight that peculiar cultural and human component of the urban system. So quite large group of activities and places in my life. Often people tell me that my background is really broad, is very broad. It is actually a compliment, but what they really mean is that I spread too thin across too many areas. So many women experience the same comment. We have career breaks, double jobs, changes in directions. We do so many things before we're really able to do what we want or achieve what we want. People don't see what is the common thread. They just see the different disciplines involved. So, but tonight, in summarizing my achievement in 3 minutes, I realized that in the last 25 years, I have been doing the same thing. And which is explore this connection between cities and landscape. Being able to do it under different disciplinary and professional perspectives has been a strength, not a weakness, because of the intrinsic nature of urban and landscape disciplines. And so researching complex urban ecosystem requires a systemic, transdisciplinary, and holistic approach, which is now my work strategy. This method is able to provide guidance to policy making and inform design and making choices, besides look at the community as a resource within the urban process. In conclusion, my personal takeaway for the people that are starting now is that it is important to find that very special overarching objective or leitmotif that is able to drive our works and professional interests. In my case, a PhD while I was still a full-time practitioner helped me to clarify the scopes and objectives of my research and design. Now I find myself helping my PhD students, the research mates, to define their objectives. Therefore, I would like to encourage all the colleagues to undertake a path to discover their very own unique driver, and eventually it's all about revealing the overall trajectory. Everything is already there. You just need to connect the dots and in a meaningful sequence. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. And thank you, Helen and UNSW, for organizing this beautiful event and for having me tonight. So, my name is Giulia Conti. I'm senior computational designer at Hustle, and I come from Genova in Italy, where I graduated in a master's degree in architecture and urbanism at the University of Genova. Well, the University of Genova was very conservative. And even then, I was the weird kid experimenting with fluid and organic architecture. So following my graduation and my registration as an architect, I moved to London, where I took a second master's degree in architecture and urbanism at the Architectural Association, and I followed the Design Research Lab. Those were 2 years of crazy, mind-blowing research. I was studying with Patrick Schumacher of Zaha Hadid Architects. So when you study with Patrick, by extension, you work for Zaha. We were developing new concepts in new directions and prototypes for her. Our ideas were nurtured and elevated till they could become one of her design. Zaha was, and she still is, one of the women who inspired me to push boundaries. At the same time, I was also reading and studying biology and evolution. It was through that I came across emergence, which is an explanation on how natural systems evolve, mutate, and sustain themselves. And I became a bit of an expert, but after the DRL, I went back to Genoa, where I had the opportunity to introduce computational design and emergent technology to my old university, which was a great satisfaction. In 2011, the global financial crisis was still being felt quite a lot. And during a financial crisis, you don't look for a job, right? So I took 6 months off, and I traveled. So my interest in natural system took me coral reef hopping around the world. And in the process, my own design philosophy began to emerge, a poetic blend of beauty, technology, and nature. Computational design allowed me to bridge the gap between the three of them. Being a computational designer gave me the tools that I needed to generate and control the complexity of that architecture that I had in my mind. And it also opened many doors that would have been otherwise closed to a young, female, and immigrant architect. Back in the days of the DRL, I didn't realize what it meant to be one of the few and first female computational designer in the world. I mean, people didn't even know what it was. And now everybody wants us. I'm an architect first and foremost, but I have to admit that it's the additional skill set of computational designer that landed me a great job in one of the most important Australian and international design studios, that gave me the opportunity to lecture in a number of universities, led me to teach at UNSW, and it's also the reason I'm here tonight. So, here in Australia, people keep asking me, what do I specialize in? It's resi or commercial? It makes me smile because through my unusual career choices and the support of some very extraordinary people on the way, I managed to avoid pigeonholes, and I specialize exactly in what makes me happy. Pure concept design, pure ideas, and pushing the boundaries whenever I can. It doesn't matter if it's resi, commercial, teaching at university, or an art installation. It could be a concept for the facade of a stadium in Ethiopia, completely made of locally sourced and crafted material, which we won while I was working at Lava, or the winning scheme for 60 Martin Place, 40,000 square meter commercial tower we've designed at Hassel that's currently under construction, or even a 4 square meters heavily coded installation about endangered bird species, which was nominated one of the 3 best installations this year Vivid by the Sydney Morning Herald. So I think I've pushed a few boundaries in the last 10 years, and I believe that we, can push more, much more. I'd love to see, and that's what I'm trying to foster, a more inclusive and interdisciplinary approach to architecture, a more supportive and flexible attitude towards female designer, and most importantly, a more inspiring environment for our students, where they're free to explore their ideas, push their own boundaries, and ultimately they can change the status quo. Thank you very much.
I just want to start off by saying thank you to all the very inspiring women tonight who've shared their stories and their advice, and that I graciously accept all your offers for mentoring. Thank you. My name is Vanessa Rowland, and I am a built environment generalist. When I finished school, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I loved nature and the outdoors. So I enrolled in a Bachelor of Arts in Nature Tourism in Bendigo, Victoria, and this is one of the beautiful ironbark forests that surrounds Bendigo. The course was amazing. I basically camped, hiked, canoed, and rock climbed for 3 years, and I know what you're thinking. It is a real degree. It cemented my passion for the environment and provided me with a brilliant foundation in sustainability. But after the 3 years, I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a nature guide, and I was feeling pretty burnt out with study. I've never felt like a natural academic. So I hit the pause button on my career, and I moved to Berlin, as you do. I gallivanted around there, learnt the language, explored the city. I then moved to Amsterdam to study my Master's in Environment and Resource Management, focusing on renewable energy. I wrote my thesis in Stockholm, exploring the concept of personal carbon trading. And in 2008, I graduated, exhausted again. But I was really excited about finding my dream green job. But then, as Julia said, the financial crisis hit Europe, and there were no jobs. So after a short stint in Edinburgh, I eventually headed back home. I realised later that those years in those 4 fantastic cities were almost like an informal degree in the built environment. I was experiencing how cities work and function, what makes them livable or sustainable or not sustainable, unsustainable. So back in Australia, I was offered a job at Curtin University in the glorious port city of Fremantle, WA, to manage a new research project called Decarbonising Cities and Regions. But the catch was I also had to do my PhD. So for the third time, I very reluctantly began to study, and through that degree and managing that project, I felt enormous imposter syndrome. I constantly battled with trying to understand if I needed to be an engineer or an urban planner or an architect. And I finally realised that it was actually okay to be a generalist, and sometimes we are even needed to help to connect these important areas. After certifying the first carbon neutral school in Australia, my team and I developed a low carbon schools pilot program in Perth, which was supported by the CRC for Low Carbon Living. This has grown into an app-based program called the Climate Clever Initiative, which we launched nationally this year. Check out climateclever.com. .org. Our vision is to empower and upskill the next generation to create a smarter low carbon future. So I've come out the end as an accidental academic and an aspiring entrepreneur. I've lectured for 7 years, written a book, and I'm now trying to turn my research into practice. I've also unexpectedly ended up being passionate about cities, which are essential if we want to preserve our gorgeous natural environment. So my words of wisdom: looking back, I realised I should have believed in myself a lot more and not let people or my grades tell me what I was or was not capable of. I know a lot of people have already said this tonight, but network. You never know where those contacts will lead you. And it sounds corny and cliche, but do the things that you are excited and passionate about, because it really does make such a difference. Things I can offer for anyone interested in startups or transitioning into their own business: I'm happy to give advice about my experiences, and we don't say failures, we say learnings. And I'm not sure about mentoring adults. I still don't know if I feel like one myself, but if you would like to sign up your daughter's schools to our Climate Clever initiative, I'd be very happy to mentor them. Yes, that was a shameless plug, and on that note, I'll end there. Thank you.
I realised how important it was to be an enthusiast in life, that if you are interested in something, no matter what it is, go for it, full steam ahead. Embrace it with both arms, hug it, love it, and above all, become passionate about it. Lukewarm is no good. Hot is no good either. White hot and passionate is the only way to be. This is one of my favourite quotes from the author Roald Dahl. As for me, passion underpins my career to date and my key takeaways. Hello, my name's Liz Westgarth. I'm an AIA chapter counsellor, and I lead architecture for Hassel in the Sydney studio. My architecture journey began unbeknownst as a child. I developed a love for art and was keen to pursue a career that embraced that passion. I studied architecture at the University of Sydney, but I think my love for architecture really emerged during my time at the London practice Future Systems. Getting the job there wasn't easy. I went to London with a limited portfolio, but a lot of enthusiasm. And in those days, before email really took off, I knocked on a lot of doors. And I still remember crying one day after dropping my CV off at one London practice, who commended me on my bravery, but kindly said that they didn't have any jobs on offer. So, needless to say, I was delighted when I received an interview at Future Systems, and even more delighted when they offered me a job for £17,000 a year. Money was tight, but that didn't matter. I was doing what I loved. Led by the directors Amanda Levitt and Jan Kaplitsky, Future Systems was an innovative practice that was best known for their Sterling Prize building, the Lord's Media Centre, and Selfridges Birmingham. Their work relentlessly pursued the new thing. It refused to settle in some predictable architectural niche. And for a young architect in training, it was a truly inspirational time. Working closely with Amanda Levitt and Jan, we collaborated with world-renowned artists such as Anish Kapoor and Anthony Gormley on some incredible projects. Amanda continues to be a mentor to me as one of the world's leading women architects. After completing my degree, I was offered a job at Foster & Partners, an obviously much larger practice, but had a common heritage and approach to Future Systems. I spent over 7 years there working on tall buildings and mixed-use developments, and most notably Masdar, a new city for 40,000 people in Abu Dhabi, which had the ambition to be car-free, carbon neutral, and energy positive. This leads me into outlining some of my achievements and what I'd like to be known for. I was sent to work on site in Masdar from when it was literally sand dunes, and was there for 3 years delivering some of the first buildings and shaping a new city. Shaping cities through innovation and design excellence is something that I continue to do in my role at Hassel. At Hassel, we are proudly delivering some incredible city-shaping projects, including 60 Martin Place and Northwest Metro. And I feel lucky to be surrounded by a team of passionate designers who have a lot of fun at work and, most importantly, support women in the built environment through our work culture and mentor programs such as Champions of Change and NAWIC. But my story is not only about design and architecture. Along the way, I met my husband, also a fellow architect, and a huge inspiration, and together we have 2 beautiful boys. It certainly isn't easy, as a number of other people have pointed out, bringing up children and balancing both of our careers, but we have a mutual respect and admiration for each other. So finally, to my 3 key takeaways. The first, bravery and perseverance. Persevere through the challenging times. Learn, grow, and take some risks. The second, the value of support and mentorship. Recognise and learn from the talented people around you, especially the ones that advocate for you. And last but not least, passion. White hot and passionate is the only thing to be. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Lower Town Hall. Thank you, Helen, for inviting me to participate in this really interesting and inspiring evening. There is amazing talent and lots of advice in this room tonight. So I'd like to first of all acknowledge the original custodians of our land, the Gadigal people, the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. So I suppose you could say my political life began in or because of a small playground in my street. We'd just returned from 5 years living and working in London. When we returned, we wanted to live in the inner city, and we bought our first house in Redfern. In contrast to London, the local area was neglected. Our local playground was asphalt with cyclone fence, surrounded by a cyclone fence with topped with barbed wire. The council said it was easier to clean up that way. You could see the broken glass. Then there was the fast, thundering one-way traffic. With the support of neighbours, I lobbied the council to make basic improvements. Their recalcitrance prompted me to form a residents group and eventually to stand for election myself for South Sydney Council as an independent. And that led me to State Parliament and to the City of Sydney as Lord Mayor and head of a majority team of independents. And this slide is my first election, 1980, a back lane in Redfern. On my left, you can see the current mayor, a future mayor, and their cronies. It was a baptism of fire, I can assure you. Unlike most of you, I don't have a traditional background in design, unless you count many years of marriage to an architect. But I do have a passion for cities and urban design. I believe the key to a successful global city is one that is environmentally sustainable, actively serviced with community infrastructure and parks and green spaces with a rich variety of choices and activities, a lively social and cultural life, and a safe and diverse nighttime culture. A city guided by the principles of design excellence. When I became Lord Mayor, I wanted a long-term plan that would take Sydney into the 21st century. So we undertook the largest ever community consultation in the city's history. And we sought expert input from professions and institutions. The result was Sustainable Sydney 2030, a plan that guides everything we do. A priority was given to design excellence in both public and private buildings and places. We appointed an expert design advisory panel. With their guidance, our projects have won over 130 awards, including projects from Felicity Stewart, Rachel Neeson, who we've heard from tonight, and of course Sue Barnsley and Jane Irwin. In any area of endeavour, you need to believe in what you do, to be bold and courageous, and to act on principle. It's what's seen me through 13 successful elections without the support of and in the face of strong opposition from the major party machines. My support has come instead from the community. And in terms of gender equity, I want to put my quite biased view. I think women are organised, resilient and collaborative. I think they're good at planning for the future and seeing things through. There are greater opportunities than ever for women, and we've heard all about them tonight. And women can succeed when I believe, when they're true to their principles and they're not deflected by naysayers, which I've met many of course, or traditional male behaviours, which of course I've experienced. After I was elected all those years ago at South Sydney Council, the former mayor was heard to groan, if only we'd given her grass in that playground. And then perhaps history may have been different, but I doubt it because there was still the thundering traffic. So my first slide was of Keppel Street Park playground in 1980, and this is what it looks like in 2018. That's what good government looks like. Thank you.
You know, you never know what you're going to get when you put a bunch of women together. But I can't say I was disappointed in any way, shape or form. I learned that everyone was diverse, which I knew already, but they were also boundary spanners, generous in spirit and energy, as well as tenacious and persevering. And I also want to say that you can do everything. Where are you? You just can't do it all necessarily at the same time. But you can do it and you can have it all. Trust me. And the other thing I learned was that there is an amazing generosity in this room and amongst these women, and I'm sure further afield of the people who are here tonight. And so I see there's a lot of mentors in the room and a lot of work to do, and that can be done with that warmth and generosity. So before I say a few concluding remarks, I'd just like you to all join me in giving them a big round of applause. But I just want to make a couple more announcements, but we have some new awards and initiatives that I just want to let you know about. First, we have one of the great things about this initiative is that we've got some new scholarships started, and that's happened over the last couple of years, and it's one of those gifts that keeps on giving. So this year, through generosity of a benefactor, Mr. Robin Mellon, we have a new Women in Built Environment Travel Award to study sustainable practices overseas, and that's going to be a $5,000 a year award. So any students who are in the room tonight, look that one up. And also, the CRC for Low Carbon Living has offered an Excellence in High Performance Architecture project prize for an outstanding woman in high performance architecture in the Master of Architecture or Sustainable Built Environment. So thank you to the CRC for Low Carbon Living for that. So you can all get involved. You don't need to give cash, but cash is always good. We can do it with that. At UNSW, we are always seeking partners to work with, whether to build agile platforms for education, research and exchange that responds to the changing needs of the professions. Our Be Involved program has 4 key initiatives that are driving the faculty's industry engagement and partnerships. Our Career Ready mentoring program, and as I can see, we've got a whole bunch of mentorees here tonight. Our professional placements, and so we are always seeking
work placements for our students and graduates, and our continuing education in single courses that allow you to gain CPD points while building towards a formal qualification in a short amount of time. And of course, our new practice-based PhD, which offers a unique opportunity to established and passionate practitioners working within a broad range of disciplines to develop a project-based research project through design practice. And Diane Jones is doing that now, as I mentioned earlier. So please ask us how you can engage. And finally, a segue to our next event. One of our stars from tonight is our Professor of Practice, Rachel Neeson, who's going to be doing our annual Donald K. Turner Lecture, which is by an eminent Australian architect. And I'm very thrilled for her to be doing that as our first female Professor of Practice. And her talk will be on the 4th of September, entitled The House in the City, the Child in the Sports Hall, of course of which you had a taster of tonight. So now, I'm sure there's plenty of women that you'd like to talk to in a bit more detail, so please join us for drinks and a speed networking session. But I have one request. You didn't come here just to listen, you have work to do too. I want everyone in this room to meet 3 people they have never met before and ask them how they're able to either help with their skills, their expertise, their guidance or support to actually develop a new partnership, a mentoring relationship, or who knows, you may meet your perfect match. So thank you and enjoy.